Arya, a kind-hearted girl, noticed the village's dire need for laborers. She told her friends that a man was needed to help the village. Miria, another girl, disagreed, thinking only women lived in the village, and they couldn't handle heavy work alone. She knew Arya despised men, but for the village's sake, she accepted it. Kiri wondered where they could find such men. She doubted anyone would come to such a remote place. Sui suggested they go find the men themselves, but Arya reminded them of the difficulty of the journey. Suddenly, a loud noise broke the silence. Arya rushed outside, her eyes scanning the sky. Above, something unexpected appeared, like a falling star. The girls rushed to see what it was. Miria thought it was a shooting star, but Arya believed it was a man flying. Months earlier, a fearsome bear had roamed the forest, terrifying everyone with its roar. Unprepared knights faced the beast. The bear attacked the knights without mercy. The knights couldn't understand why the bear had appeared and struggled to help their fallen comrades. Just when it seemed all was lost, a young man appeared. The young man, Rain Wolfield, swiftly defeated the bear, relieved to have handled the beast before it could summon more monsters. The knights, panicking, blamed Rain for arriving late, and the commander ordered a retreat, but Rain told them it was too late. Their enemies were already surrounding them. The bear had summoned more monsters with its roar. The knights hid behind trees, afraid, and had no plan except to rely on Rain. Rain reassured them that the number of monsters didn't matter. As the creatures roared again, Rain activated his accelerated thinking skill, waiting for something. The knights braced for their final moments, but Rain realized there were more monsters than usual. Over 100, he guessed. Rain used his scouting skill to count the creatures surrounding him. He then activated trajectory sensing and wiped out the monsters in the blink of an eye. With his magical energy still flowing, Rain canceled accelerated thinking just as the monster's claws came at him. In one swing, Rain sent the bears' heads flying, cleaved by his wind blades. One by one, the monsters fell, powerless before him. Soon, only the remains of the creatures lay scattered. The knights were stunned by how Rain had annihilated so many monsters so quickly. They saw him as almost demon-like, but they didn't care anymore. The monsters were dead and turning to stone. As one turned to stone, a knight eagerly picked up a piece. The stone could make them rich, but he was quickly reminded that it didn't belong to him. Rain kept scanning the area, ensuring no other threats remained. The knights began collecting the stones, overjoyed by the wealth they might gain. With Rain on their side, monster hunting seemed effortless. Meanwhile, Rain had spent 15 years with demon-slaying sorcerers. In truth, Rain had been reincarnated, something he still found hard to believe. Once an ordinary office worker, his last memory was drinking alone at home. He wasn't sure if he'd died from alcohol or something else, but it didn't matter now. He was a demon-slaying sorcerer. The demon-slaying nobles lived near dangerous areas like the Demon Forest and Monster Valley, tasked with protecting the kingdom from monsters. However, they were nobles only in name. Rain had never been treated as one. When Rain returned to the conference room, he was praised for his work. The steward of the border army from the Holy Kingdom, lounging with his feet up, congratulated Rain on slaying so many monsters and offered a reward, a bag of money. But Rain quickly saw it wasn't enough and grew angry. The steward didn't understand, reminding Rain that he owed everything to the king's mercy. He argued that Rain, already wealthy, shouldn't complain. Rain didn't argue. He simply said he'd be in town if anyone needed him. Rain left for town, his thoughts focused on making more money. It had been over a month since his last visit, and as he passed an old friend's house, he wondered if the friend was doing well. Without much thought, Rain decided to visit. His old friend Zur, whom he hadn't seen in ages, greeted him warmly. Zur was thrilled to see Rain and immediately began asking about his life. Rain replied sadly that he was still on his own. Zur sighed, advising Rain to let him know if he needed work, warning him that if he kept this up, he'd wear himself out. Zur knew Rain was always fighting monsters, while the cowardly knights did nothing. Rain asked Zur if there were any new books. Zur showed him some books on magic. Rain's eyes lit up, amazed by the rarity of the books. Zur had kept them just for him, knowing Rain's love for magical knowledge. Rain was constantly seeking perfection, believing there was still much to explore in ancient magic. He eagerly began reading, noticing how the magical language was similar to programming languages from his previous world, making it easy to understand. Rain became absorbed in studying star magic and creative magic. Meanwhile, Zur grew concerned about Rain's research on curses, knowing that demon-slaying nobles rarely lived past 40. Zur pressed Rain. worried about his health. Rain paused, but then smiled and reassured Zur not to worry. Zur, however, couldn't help but express concern. Rain was already 15, and the years would pass quickly. He didn't understand why Rain was so unconcerned about the curse. Rain hesitated, knowing Zur was right. Demon-slaying sorcerers rarely live past 40 due to the curse. But that was a fact Rain had accepted. He reassured Zur that he was making progress with his research on the curse, though more information from the ancestors would bring him greater peace of mind. Noticing Zur's troubled mood, Rain asked what was wrong. Zur confided in Rain that he was about to leave the country. He had decided to move in with his grandchildren, closing his shop and parting with the books. Rain felt fortunate to have bought all of Zur's books, even though it would take more than a day to transport them. He still believed that ancient magic held immense value. Rain waved his hand over a book and cast the storage spell, making the book vanish instantly. This was a form of star magic, allowing Rain to send anything he touched into another dimension. If he ever forgot what he stored, he could simply use a list to view everything he had placed in the storage. This magic had been incredibly useful, and Rain couldn't imagine life without it. Since it was an ancient spell from a lost civilization, Rain decided to use it discreetly and quickly finished storing the books. As he left the city, Rain reflected on how, despite mastering many ancient spells, he still couldn't escape the curse looming over him. Without a solution, Rain was doomed to die at 40, something he was determined to avoid. His mind constantly searched for a way to break free. Then he remembered his vegetable garden. As he approached his house, he was horrified. A carriage was parked in the middle of his garden, and the horses were devouring his crops. Furious, Rain rushed over, shouting at the horses to stop, knowing how hard he had worked to grow the vegetables. But the horses continued to eat without care. Suddenly, a knight rudely drove a sword into the ground in front of Rain. His anger flared, but the knight casually said that Count Runenford was present, and no outsiders were allowed. Rain, furious, declared that this was his home, and that they would have to compensate for the damage to his crops. The knight simply stated that he was with the Count. At that moment, the uninvited Count Runenford stepped out of Rain's house, smiling. The Count addressed Rain as "my son," and told him that their conversation would have to wait. He had been summoned by the king and needed to prepare immediately. Rain was stunned to be called son by a man he had never met. Confused, Rain couldn't understand why his father had come for him now. The Count noticed his shock and suggested they talk later, adding that Rain's fiancée, someone he had never heard of, was waiting for him in the capital. To Rain's disbelief, the fiancée was none other than the princess of the country, Mistress Amelia. Astonished, Rain followed his father to the capital, still in shock. 2 months later, Rain was supposed to win the princess's heart. The Count urged him to be serious, but Rain was nervous. The Count explained that, due to the short life expectancy of demon-slaying sorcerers, it had been decided that Rain would marry the princess instead of continuing his monster hunting. Rain had heard this from his mother, but the Count added that if Rain failed, another groom would be chosen from families with sons his age. This left Rain confused. The Count saw his confusion and realized Rain had known nothing of this arrangement. The Count, worried, emphasized that if Rain succeeded in marrying the princess, they would become part of the royal family, and all the responsibility would rest on his shoulders. Finally, the Count asked if Rain was listening. Rain smiled and nodded. The Count, excited at the thought of gaining royal power, told Rain to thank his mother for bringing him into this world. The Count trusted Rain to succeed, but those words only left Rain feeling more disheartened. He knew his father didn't truly believe in him. He was simply using him for his own ambitions. When Rain's mother was dying from the curse, the Count had not acted like a true father. The only reason he remembered Rain now was because he was desperate for royal power. That was why he had pressured Rain into marrying the princess. Rain realized that his once peaceful life had been shattered the moment his father pulled him into these power games. At first, Rain had assumed the princess would be unattractive, but when he saw her, his eyes widened in surprise. The princess looked at him, and for the first time, Rain found her not only cute, but truly beautiful. However, just as the ceremony was about to begin, the princess suddenly apologized to Rain. Looking regretful, he took her hand but didn't understand the reason for her apology. The ceremony began, and the king took the stage to deliver his speech. Suddenly, the grand doors of the hall swung open, and a young man entered, kneeling before the king. He apologized first, then asked the king to reconsider his decision. The king, stroking his long beard, asked the young man his name. The young man replied confidently, Introducing himself as Checklist, the eldest son of Duke Grand Height, Rain sensed something was off. What was most unusual was that no one seemed to react. Despite being a duke's son, interrupting a royal engagement was unthinkable. Yet Rain chose not to confront the issue himself. He knew that wasn't the right course of action. He also noticed the strange expressions on all the guests' faces. At that moment, Checklist boldly stated that the princess had the right to marry for love. To Rain's surprise, the princess let go of his hand and stepped back. It was then that Rain understood everything. The entire event had been orchestrated long ago, and everyone present, except Rain and the Count, knew exactly what was going to happen. The king turned to Count Runnenford, asking for his opinion on Checklist's request. The Count was caught off guard when the king addressed him. With trembling hands, the Count explained that the marriage between demon-slaying sorcerers was an ancient tradition, a sacred ritual that could not be broken. The king, having heard the Count, turned to Rain for his view. Rain knelt before the king and spoke, stating that the noble families who fought demons had long since disappeared. In fact, 5 years ago, he had taken on that responsibility himself. He suggested that it would be wise to break the engagement now, as problems could arise from this marriage in the future. The king, surprised by Rain's maturity at just 15, asked if he had really been fighting demons since he was 10 years old. Rain nodded, confirming it was true, and said it had become normal for him. However, the guests began to whisper amongst themselves, clearly skeptical. They doubted that a boy like Rain could have survived the demon forest, let alone killed demons. Sensing their disbelief, the king asked Rain to explain how he had dealt with the demons. Although Rain was puzzled by their interest, he decided to demonstrate. Rain explained that he used a spell called Wind Blades. As soon as the words left his mouth, the guests burst into laughter. They laughed loudly, pointing at Rain. Even the king chuckled when he heard about the spell. Wind Blades was considered weak, far too ineffective to kill demons, and nearly everyone had it. But Rain couldn't understand why they mocked it. He believed that with proper refinement, Wind Blades could become far more powerful and use less mana. Then the king made his announcement. The engagement was cancelled immediately. The words struck Rain like a lightning bolt. However, the king explained that he had long wished to abolish the tradition set by the first king. He found the idea of using basic magic like Wind Blades to fight demons utterly laughable. The Count, sensing the gravity of the situation, opened his mouth to speak but was too nervous. Knights approached and asked the Count to leave the ceremony. In the end, the demon-slaying nobles were dismissed, and both the Count and Rain were expelled from the event. The Count, enraged, blamed everything on Rain and disowned him, declaring he would sever all ties. From that day on, Rain became a commoner, with his father's threat echoing. He would never be allowed to see him again. No matter what Rain said, no one cared anymore. From this, Rain learned a harsh lesson. This world showed no mercy. He lay on the grass, realizing with a jolt that he was unemployed. How would he survive? His small garden wouldn't sustain him, and other nations offered no opportunities. Who would hire a homeless man? His thoughts were filled with bleak uncertainty. Rain considered becoming an adventurer, given his demon hunting experience. But soon he realized, after everything that had happened, no one would accept him. Suddenly, an idea hit him. He stood up, deciding to leave the country. He had thought of this before, but demon-slaying nobles were forbidden from leaving the kingdom. But now, Rain was free to do as he pleased. He began planning. Walking would be too slow, so he decided to try flying by compressing air beneath his feet, propelling himself like a rocket. After some preparation, Rain was ready, with enough supplies to last a few days. He enhanced his body with magic and used wind spells to reduce air resistance. Now, Rain was certain that everything would go smoothly. Without hesitation, he set his plan in motion. In a flash, Rain shot into the sky like a bullet, reaching the edge of space for a brief moment. It felt like a huge success. With such a leap, he could go anywhere. The only issue was he had no idea where to go next. But as Rain began to fall, he realized he hadn't planned for landing. Hovering in midair, he cursed himself for not thinking of that. The more immediate concern was finding a safe place to land. He flew over populated areas, knowing he couldn't land there. He quickly realized he needed a forest or mountain for a safe landing. Rain tried to adjust his direction with wind magic, but quickly realized he was falling too fast to control. In this moment, he knew that heroes often summon all their willpower in times of danger, but he had no desire to die here. Eventually, he crash-landed in a forest. The same forest Arya and her friends had seen when they spotted him flying overhead now beckoned them to investigate what had fallen. Arya was eager to go alone, but the others insisted it was too dangerous. Finally, one of the girls, perched high in a tree, spotted what they were searching for. Arya's excitement grew, and she eagerly asked where to head next. The answer was clear. They had to venture into the demon forest where rain had fallen. As they entered, the devastation around them made them question their next move. If something could cause such destruction, the monsters might soon go berserk. Arya agreed and suggested they return to the village to prepare a defense plan. But just then, Sui called out, pointing ahead. Arya approached, asking what was wrong, and Sui pointed to a figure lying ahead. At that moment, Rain awoke, realizing he was alive. Barely. He was lucky to have used body enhancement magic, or he would have been dead. Still dizzy, he couldn't rise. Had he run out of mana? Arya knelt beside him, asking if he was okay. The others gathered around, staring at him. Kiri asked if he was still alive, and Lin bluntly questioned whether he had survived, noting that anyone who fell asleep in the demon forest was as good as dead. The mention of demon forest made Rain snap to attention. He sat up quickly, asking where he was. They answered, the kingdom of Astra. He followed up with another question. Who are you? Kiri explained they were from a nearby village. Rain had never heard of Astra. Lin then tried to ask where he came from, but Rain's growing sense of danger kept him distracted. He warned the girls to run, as monsters would soon appear. But it was too late. A demon wolf appeared on the hill. Arya panicked, shocked by how quickly the creature had arrived. Miria screamed for them to leave. More demon wolves were coming. Rain cast a quick, scouting spell, realizing they were surrounded by too many monsters. With his remaining mana, he could only use wind blades once, before losing all strength. Arya, furious, demanded to know what Rain was doing, and insisted they needed to run. But Rain was resolute. He would clear a path for them to escape. Arya disagreed, thinking he couldn't possibly fight them all, but Rain ignored her protests. He told everyone to lie down if they didn't want to die. Reluctantly, they obeyed. Rain began chanting Windblades. In an instant, all the demon wolves around them were vanquished. Exhausted, Rain collapsed, and the girls dragged him back to the village. Kiri, pulling him along, marveled at how Rain had taken down so many wolves by himself. Arya, dragging his other leg, mentioned he passed out right after. Kiri teasingly pointed out that Arya's wish had come true. She had seen a shooting star and wished for a man to help them, and now they were dragging one back to the village. Arya protested, embarrassed. She argued that they needed Rain for the village's survival, and she only saw him as a helper. But the others disagreed, praising Arya's efforts. Kiri suggested Arya train her brain as much as her muscles, which made Arya snap at her to be quiet. Miria agreed a strong man like Rain would be useful, but the real question was whether he'd stay. As they continued, Kiri and Miria whispered, and Arya shot them an annoyed look. Kiri reminded Arya that first impressions matter, and Arya nervously agreed. Finally, Rain stirred awake. His first question was, "Where am I?" He winced, touching his head, realizing it hurt and feeling a cold compress. Miria, Kiri, and Arya entered, each carrying food. They were relieved to see he had woken up. Rain apologized for the trouble he caused, but Arya couldn't help but complain about how hard it had been to drag him back. Kiri and Miria quickly nudged her to stop. As Rain sat confused, the girls whispered among themselves, trying to figure things out. Miria reminded Arya to lower her voice. Sui and Lin entered, both happy to see Rain awake. Lin thanked him for saving them and asked if he was a sorcerer. Rain awkwardly replied, "Almost." Sui, in awe, said it was the most powerful magic she'd ever seen. The girls then suggested Rain could stay as long as he wanted. Rain thanked them, admitting he had nowhere else to go. This excited the girls even more, especially since there were no men in their village. Rain found it odd there were no men, but the girls quickly changed the subject. Arya handed him food, telling him to eat and recover. The girls hurried out of the room, shutting the door behind them. Lin and Sui weren't happy with the others leaving, since they still wanted to chat with Rain. Meanwhile, Kiri and Miria were thrilled. They saw Rain as a perfect find for the village and weren't going to let this chance slip by. Now they had a new source of strength for the village. Miria was determined to ensure Rain stayed. Arya, however, envisioned Rain not only protecting the village but working the fields too. Miria thought he could help fix houses, while Kiri was happy to repair the broken fence. Lin listened with confusion and judgment, but in the end, all the girls agreed they couldn't let Rain leave. Meanwhile, Rain ate quietly, unaware of their plans. The next morning, the girls prepared breakfast, moving carefully. Rain, now feeling better, had gotten out of bed and was preparing for the day. After resting, he could move normally again. As Rain gazed at the clothes rack, he noticed his clothes had been washed by the girls, a kind gesture that filled him with gratitude. He decided to thank them sincerely. Wearing his freshly washed clothes, Rain stepped into the hallway, realizing this was his first time leaving his room since arriving. He wondered where the girls were now. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, Rain couldn't believe how quickly events had unfolded. When he found the girls, they were having breakfast. Arya asked if he was feeling better. Miria greeted him with a cheerful good morning, and Kiri reminded Lin to chew more quietly. Kiri invited Rain to join them at the table, and he accepted, sitting next to her. With her mouth full, Lin thanked Rain for saving her the day before. Kiri, irritated, smacked Lin lightly on the head, telling her to chew first. Lin, looking upset, asked why Kiri had done that. Kiri replied, exasperated, that talking with your mouth full was rude. Kiri told Lin she wouldn't get any more rice today, which made Lin upset. Rain smiled at the playful bickering, appreciating the lively atmosphere. Miria, noticing his smile, said it was all thanks to him. Miria explained that they never expected someone to fall from the sky, so they investigated, only to be attacked by wolves. Rain had saved them all. Rain, however, felt he should thank the girls for bringing him back and caring for his injuries. Sui sat quietly, looking down at her plate with a sad expression. Miria noticed and asked if Sui wanted more food, then decided to bring her a second helping without waiting for a response. Meanwhile, Arya placed her hand on the table, her expression serious, and told Rain they needed to talk after breakfast. Arya said she would show Rain around the village once he was done eating. She added that there were a few things they needed to take care of on their walk. Miria and Kiri smiled, but their expressions seemed forced, as if trying to appear cheerful. Rain, sensing something was off, asked if anything was wrong. Kiri and Miria replied in unison, nothing. After breakfast, Rain and Arya walked around the village. He found it wasn't bad, but Arya explained that most villagers had fled due to the proximity of the demon forest. Arya explained that due to the village's proximity to the demon forest, most villagers had already fled to safer areas, leaving only women behind. She added that with the men gone, they were grateful to have someone like Rain among them. Eventually, Arya took Rain to a vacant plot and claimed it was now his. She told him he would need to share part of the harvest with the women as payment and would have to work hard to cultivate the land. Rain stood there, utterly confused, staring at the barren field, unable to grasp what was happening. Arya felt sure she'd explained everything clearly and was ready to leave, but Rain suddenly grabbed her shoulder and asked her to wait. Arya's anger flared from the surprised touch, but Rain only asked what he was supposed to do. Ignoring him, Arya quickly walked away, claiming she had other matters to attend to. Rain stood there, confused and unsure of what he should do next. He checked his inventory and felt relieved to see all the tools he needed. He wondered what his next move should be. Rain decided the first task was to level the land and then gather wood. Armed with his tools, he began working. Meanwhile, Kiri and Arya sat inside a small house, talking. Kiri was frustrated with Arya for leaving Rain alone, unable to understand her reasoning. Arya believed Rain should work to repay the food and shelter they had given him, but Kiri was sure he couldn't handle it alone, and that it would take a long time. Arya yelled that she understood but still wanted the land used for farming. Kiri decided to deal with it later, and reminded Arya they needed to be friendly to convince Rain to stay in the village. Kiri grabbed Arya's face, urging her not to be too harsh at first, but to show Rain kindness instead. She explained this was their only chance, and they couldn't let Rain leave under any circumstances. Arya, on the verge of tears, cried out, asking Kiri what she was supposed to do, knowing she was afraid of men. Kiri softly asked her not to cry. Arya felt she'd done nothing wrong. She had only shown Rain the village and where he could live. Kiri apologized for being too pushy and admitted she'd overreacted. Just then, Miria appeared, overhearing that Rain was working alone and fuming with anger. Miria thought it was wrong to give Rain such a task, fearing he might run away. Arya then realized Miria was right and decided to check on him. Meanwhile, Rain was almost finished with his work, just needing to tidy up a bit more. He planned to deal with the chopped wood when Arya suddenly appeared, furious, and shouted, "What is this?" She stared at the pile of wood in disbelief, asking if it came from the demon forest. Rain calmly explained that he leveled the land and had to cut down the extra trees, thinking they were useless to the girls. However, Arya was more concerned about why he'd cut down so many trees. Rain didn't understand why Arya was upset, since she'd told him to make the land livable. Arya, still angry, argued he'd gone too far. She was confused, knowing that damaging the demon forest this much would surely provoke an attack from the monsters. Believing they'd face a horde of monsters, she decided to rush back to the village and warn everyone about the impending danger. Rain urged Arya not to worry so much, but Arya, frustrated, snapped that he couldn't possibly understand the seriousness of the situation and told him to stop talking nonsense. Rain urged Arya not to worry so much, but Arya, frustrated, snapped that he couldn't possibly understand the seriousness of the situation and told him to stop talking nonsense. As Arya sped off, Rain was left wondering what his next move should be. The biggest challenge, he realized, was not knowing where the monsters would strike. He briefly considered building a wall around the village, but soon he realized he couldn't defend the village alone against an entire monster attack. Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck him. Meanwhile, Arya returned to the village and told everyone that Rain had cut down trees from the demon forest. The villagers were stunned, and Arya quickly apologized, taking full responsibility. But Lin slammed her hand on the table and declared that it wasn't Arya's fault, though she was unsure what to do next. Sui, noticing Lin's anxiety, approached her and offered some comfort. At this moment, Miria thought about how strong Rain was, but if he failed, the entire village would fall. The girls felt helpless. Arya said they had no choice but to join Rain and work together to protect the village from the monsters. The girls agreed and headed to Rain's location. Arya sensed the monsters were getting closer, while Miria feared how many there might be. Suddenly, Lin screamed and pointed. She pointed at a massive hole that had appeared right before them. Arya was stunned. The hole had never been there before. She guessed it had been made by a demon emerging from the forest. At that moment, the roars of monsters echoed, and the girls realized that Rain had already begun fighting, so they rushed to assist him. Soon, the girls found Rain standing at the edge of a cliff. They were shocked to see him there. Hearing them approach, Rain turned around and warned the girls to be careful. On the other side of the cliff, a horde of monsters had gathered. Kiri began to panic, unsure how to face an army of monsters. Lin, standing beside her and just as terrified, tried to calm her down, telling her not to worry. Rain asked the girls to wait a moment and told them he was nearly finished. In his hands, he held a bow, but there were no arrows. The girls were confused by this, but Rain knew that by drawing the bowstring, wind arrows would form, weak at a distance, but much stronger when enemies were close, with the potential for damage ranging from minor to devastating. With that, Rain began to use his magic. He imbued the arrow with a spell called Wind Blades. Arya watched in confusion, unable to grasp what was unfolding. A fierce gust of wind surrounded Rain, and the arrow finally appeared on his bow. Without hesitation, Rain took aim and fired the arrow at the advancing monsters, its speed and force unimaginable. The demon wolves charged toward Rain, oblivious to the danger. But as soon as the arrow struck the first wolf, Rain shouted, "Arrow of wind!" A blast of wind blades erupted, and to their amazement, the arrow continued slicing through the wolves, one after another. The girls stood in awe, both amazed and thrilled by the spectacle. But suddenly a magic stone struck Lin on the head. The girls quickly realized that the falling stones were from the demons they had defeated, knowing these treasures could secure them a comfortable life for years. In that instant, everyone understood that Rain had single-handedly defeated the entire demon pack. Rain glanced at his bow, realizing he had overdone it. He hadn't even needed it to win the battle. Just then, Arya ran to Rain, standing at the edge of a pit, and mentioned seeing a similar hole on their way here. She wondered if more monsters were lurking nearby. Rain explained that he had created these holes using his earth manipulation powers. He added that while they still needed wood, defending against constant monster attacks would be difficult. That's why he had dug a protective moat around the village. Rain assured them that this moat would eliminate worries about where the monsters might strike next. Arya then asked what would happen if the monsters simply jumped over it. Rain explained that he had made a narrow section where monsters could leap across, so the villagers only needed to defend that one point. Miria, clutching a pile of magic stones, was thrilled the problem had been solved. She believed the moat would be incredibly helpful, and thanked Rain once again for saving them. Meanwhile, Lin, curious, peered into the moat, trying to gauge its depth, as Sui stood beside her, reminding her to be careful. Miria then noticed the pile of wood Rain had chopped and was even more impressed. Rain explained he had cut extra wood because many of the village houses needed repairs. Miria agreed it was just the right amount, not too much or too little. Suddenly, someone jumped onto Rain from behind. It was Lin. unable to contain her excitement, and she hugged him tightly. Surprised, Rain asked why she did that. Lin simply smiled and said, "You're really strong." Rain chuckled and promised to keep doing his best. Still clinging to him, Lin declared she wanted to work alongside him. As Lin clung happily to Rain's back, Arya stood nearby, lost in thought. She pondered everything Rain had done and realized that his control over the land was the key to his incredible power. But she began to wonder how much strength it would take to do that. Arya feels that Rain is definitely the one to save their village. Meanwhile, Rain was asking Lin to get off his back, but she refused. Sui, standing nearby, also wanted Rain to carry her. When Lin finally agreed to come down, Rain noticed Arya's thoughtful expression. He approached and asked if anything was wrong. Arya replied with some annoyance, saying that Rain had caused a mess here. However, Lin disagreed and stood up for him, claiming he was just trying to save them. But Rain thinks everything is because of him. Arya, although still a bit upset, said that she was glad that Rain understood that. She claims to forgive this time, but if he does something similar again, she won't be so easy. Rain didn't want to argue, so he just promised to be more careful from now on. Meanwhile, the others teased Arya for being too strict, making her smile. She decided to let it go and invited Rain back to the village. At this point, Rain realized he would stay in this village for a while. While standing near the cliff, Arya asked Rain what he would do with the remaining magical stones left by the monster. If you leave them there, other monsters may eat them. Rain decided to collect the stones and bring them back to the village. Miria seemed more interested than the others in the idea of collecting magic stones, but Lin asked an important question. How do we get to the other side? Because there is no demand. But that's not a problem for Rain. He used his earth control skills to make the ground coalesce into a temporary bridge. The girls were surprised to see Rain create the bridge in the blink of an eye. Lin is most excited and realizes that magic is truly a miracle. She ran after Rain and begged him to teach her magic. However, Rain refused, saying that it was not time for her to study yet. Rain understands that not everyone can learn magic, which is why there are strict selection processes before training begins. I think this country is the same. However, Lin persisted. With teary eyes, she begged Rain to teach her magic, but he still refused. Even at night, when everyone gathered for dinner, Lin continued to beg Rain to teach her magic, promising to do whatever he wanted. However, Rain explains that no matter how much she begs, he will not teach her magic, especially since she probably won't succeed. But Lin promised to do her best. At this time, Arya and Kiri were ladling soup into bowls. Meanwhile, Lin refused to let Rain eat. She climbed onto his lap and sat there. Even though Rain asked her to come down, Lin still refused, begging him to teach her magic. Rain was surprised that Lin could sit on his lap easily, even though she was a girl. But Lin didn't feel embarrassed at all. To her, Rain is like her older brother. Finally, Kiri couldn't take it anymore, and intervened. She grabbed Lin's face and politely asked her to let Rain eat in peace. Finally, Lin reluctantly got off Rain's lap. Kiri apologized to Rain, saying he could eat freely now. She then took Lin back to her room. Even though Lin protested that she hadn't eaten anything, Kiri didn't care, pointing out that Lin was already sitting at the table without touching her chopsticks. Lin screams that it's not fair. After a while, all the discs were empty. Rain helped Kiri clean up. She apologized again, thanking him for his help, but for Rain, it's not a big deal. He was more worried about Lin, who hadn't eaten anything yet. However, Kiri thinks Lin needs to reflect on her actions. While Rain kept a calm attitude, Kiri apologized again because Lin had been bothering him all day. Rain smiled and reassured her that it was okay, but Kiri felt she needed to pay more attention to Lin. Suddenly, Rain thought about the strange way Lin spoke. Her voice sounded more like a man's voice than that of a young girl. Kiri decided to tell Rain a story. She started by saying that Lin used to have a brother, and they were always together. Lin loved her brother very much. Rain asks what happened, and Kiri explains that Lin's brother died in a monster attack. At that moment, Rain realized he had mentioned a sensitive topic and felt awkward. He apologized for bringing up something sad, but Kiri reassured him that it was okay, telling him not to worry. However, Kiri admits that Lin is still under the influence and believes that if she knew magic, she might have been able to save her brother. In the end, Kiri promised to talk to Lin, and told Rain not to think too much about it. That's when Rain understood that Lin wanted to learn magic to protect the people she loved and protect her home. With that in mind, Rain decided. When everyone was asleep, he prepared all the necessary things, determined to make it happen. The next morning, Rain gathered everyone in one room. He announced that from today, he will start teaching the girls magic. Naturally, Lin was the most excited. However, Arya is clearly unhappy, and Rain notices, asking why she has such an expression. She replied irritably, saying that perhaps he had some strange intentions again. But Rain tried to explain that he wasn't thinking too far ahead. He admitted that he did not know how magic was commonly taught in this country. Miria explains that older wizards usually just train their students, that's all. Miria also added that when magicians take on girls with no magical talent as students, they often have other purposes. In some cases, they even want to adopt the girls. But those who were skilled in magic were often sent to rich merchants or nobles and became courtesans. Rain was surprised by these stories and didn't understand why the country was like this. Anyway, he still wanted to start the lesson right away. He handed out cards to the girls and asked them to use them. The girls were surprised and didn't know what the card was. Rain explains that it is a magic measuring card. Lin is curious to know how to use magic measuring cards, while Kiri is worried about how expensive they are. However, Rain doesn't think they are very expensive. Unexpectedly, Miria said that when she infused a little magic into the card, some words appeared. Rain was a bit surprised because he didn't expect Miria to know how to do that, exactly what he planned to teach them today. Miria explains that she's used a little magic before. Rain explains that the magic measuring card will indicate the element to which the user is naturally inclined. He believes that each person has a talent for a specific element, and the gauge card will indicate which element is suitable for each person. Lin, seeing Miria's penchant for light magic, was anxious to know her element. However, when just waving the card, nothing happened. Rain laughed and explained that magic couldn't be used that way. First, she had to learn to sense magical energy. Lin was disappointed that she couldn't do it right away. She then wondered what magic measuring cards had to do with magic. Rain likes this question, and explains that magic is activated by using the mana in the body to cast spells. So, the most important step is to learn how to sense magical energy. Even though Rain explained carefully, Lin still didn't completely understand. Rain continued, saying that he had prepared magic measuring cards to help them sense their mana better. Rain explains that in learning magic, this is the most important step. It turns out that magic measuring cards have the ability to absorb magical energy, and thanks to them, the girls' training will progress faster. Lin was eager to learn, but Rain gently patted her head, telling her there was no need to rush. She would learn everything with time. It's important not to worry too much. As Rain explained to everyone, one of the girls commented that Rain looked a lot like a teacher now, making him a bit confused. At that moment, Kiri started crying because she couldn't do anything with her card and thought her magic meter card was broken. Arya has her magic meter card, but for some reason she appears scared and hesitant to use it. After a few hours, Sui and Lin were successful. Lin has a natural talent for water magic, while Sui is proficient in earth magic. However, Kiri was still struggling with determining the amount of magic power and felt worried. At that time, Rain decided to continue the lesson, wanted to show the girls basic magic. He asked them to pay close attention as he began demonstrating water magic to Sui and Lin. The girls were surprised, but once wasn't enough for them. They asked Rain to do it again. Rain didn't expect the girls to be so enamored, so he decided to let Sui try again and gave her a cup. However, the lesson is interrupted when Arya suggests they start with physical training. Hearing that, Rain asked Arya if she knew anything about magic. She replied that she knew a little, but thought it best to start with improving her physical strength. Rain agrees that Arya's suggestion is reasonable, but he thinks it's a good idea to start with elemental magic first. If a certain level of magical skill is not achieved, physical enhancement will not be effective. However, Arya argues that anyone can use this magic, while Rain claims that is not entirely true. Rain explains that it is rare for people to be able to use magic effectively without having a natural affinity for that element. Arya bowed her head and asked if she had magic power. Wouldn't she be able to use physical enhancement magic properly? Rain explains that even though it can be used, if there is no talent for any element, development will not be good. Therefore, it is better to focus on one's natural element. Hearing that, Arya fell silent and started to leave. Rain asked what was wrong, but Arya only replied that she needed fresh air. Rain looked after Arya, guessing that maybe she didn't like his teaching style. He decided to apologize and told Sui and Lin to wait for him. But at that moment, Kiri whispered to Rain that he hadn't done anything wrong. It was just that Arya was really grateful that he decided to teach them math. Kiri encouraged Rain to continue and encouraged him to continue training with Lin and Sui. Rain did as she was told, but Lin was still having trouble. No matter how hard she tried, the water wouldn't move. Rain told her not to rush and turned to Sui, noticing that she hadn't made much progress either. Sui is determined to try if Lin succeeds, but Rain explains that there is no need to compare with Lin. At this time, Kiri and Arya returned to the room. Arya approached Rain and politely asked him to teach her magic. Lin teased that Arya wouldn't be able to keep up with them, but Arya firmly stated that they would soon see who needed to keep up. In this situation, Rain decided to try again. That evening, the girls began preparing dinner. Lin practiced all day but still failed, making her very frustrated. Arya also hasn't succeeded and begins to think that she has no talent for magic. However, Rain reassured her that that was not true. He believes that Arya has great potential with other elements and is impressed with her eagerness to learn about nihilistic magic. He believes that one day she will master physical enhancement magic. These words helped Arya feel a little more relieved. Rain realizes that Arya is gifted with fire magic and decides to train her in how to create fire. Arya asks if this magic is really useful. Kiri and Miria immediately chimed in, arguing that using fire magic would be much easier, since creating fire manually was such a pain. In the end, Rain complimented all the girls, including Lin and Sui. Lin is happy that they are getting closer to success, while Sui thinks it's all thanks to Rain's lessons, and without him, they wouldn't have been able to do it. Kiri agrees with Sui, saying that Rain is an excellent teacher. She admitted that at first she didn't understand anything, but thanks to Rain's clear explanations, everything now fell into place. However, Rain felt like he wasn't doing anything special. Arya also agreed with Kiri. She said she practiced with her old teacher but never succeeded. She used to think she was gifted with nihilistic magic, but now she knows that's not true. Kiri reminds Arya that at first she didn't want to listen to Rain. Arya apologizes and admits that she understands things more clearly now and really wants to learn from him. Rain just felt happy that he could teach the girls something useful. Lin insisted that she would not be inferior to the others and decided to use earth control magic right at the dinner table. Although Rain tried to stop it, it was too late. With her strength, Lin filled the entire kitchen with dirt. Rain explains that this happened because she poured too much prana into the magic, which was not the right way. Lin smiled sheepishly and apologized to everyone, but it was too late. Kiri had already begun to speak. Kiri grabbed Lin's face, angrily asking what they were going to do with her when the whole room was full of dirt. Lin kept apologizing with regret, while Arya was only worried about getting her clothes dirty. Lin even promised not to let this happen again as she became stronger. Miria laughed, realizing this was the most fun dinner they had ever had. At that moment, Sui approached Miria, who was wiping her face with a handkerchief. Without thinking much, Miria suggested that the girls take a bath. Kiri wasn't sure if Miria was serious because the lake was so far away. Rain then asked if they had a bathtub, and they replied of course not. Miria argues that baths are only for nobles, and that keeping the water warm requires magical tools, which are expensive. Rain thought for a while, suggested that he could make their own bathtub for them. Hearing that, the girls were extremely excited. They started asking Rain when the bath would be done, and Rain replied that since it would be using magic, it wouldn't take long. However, he added that they would need a large space to do it. Miria told Rain that there was a storage facility near his house, which he could use freely. The girls, excited because they were about to take a bath, started talking about clothes, baskets, towels, and soap. Without hesitation, they ran out of the house to gather everything they needed. Rain didn't know how to feel, because the girls seemed to be deciding everything for him so naturally. When they led Rain to the place where the Gore wanted to place the bathtub, he was stunned by the vast space. He asked them if they were sure they wanted a bathtub that big, and Miria replied, "The bigger the better." Rain was still amazed, because this was the largest warehouse in the village, but Miria explains that they don't use it for anything else. Arya has always dreamed of having a bath near her home, and Miria is happy to finally have one. Kiri, wanting to swim, asked Rain to make a deep bath. The Arya requires a shower and tile floors to look presentable. Lin asked Rain to make a lion statue with hot water coming out of its mouth, while Sui wanted a place for a water slide. The girls eagerly waited for Rain to fulfill all their requests. Even though Rain promises to do his best, he's still not sure how to accomplish it all. But when he saw the girls' expectant faces, Rain realized he couldn't retreat. He couldn't disappoint them. Rain decided to solve the land problem first. Rain realized that this large bath would require a lot of land, so he used earth magic to expand the area. Lin watched in surprise as Rain used earth magic. Rain just said that she would do so soon and continued working. Using earth magic, Rain began to shape the bath. Then he wondered where to put it and pointed to a spot, asking the girls if they agreed. The girls agreed. Rain continued to use earth magic to shape the bath. After a while, the bath was formed and Sui and Lin were overjoyed. Finally, the bath is completed. Kiri and Arya asked Rain if he was done when they saw the progress. Rain replied that he wasn't done yet and that he would use a magic called earth casting to complete it. After using magic, Rain completed the bath and added ceramic tiles at the girls' request. Lin was excited, realizing that even something like this could be created with magic. The bath that Arya wanted looked beautiful, but she still had doubts about its sturdiness. She gently tapped the bathtub to check. The girls climbed into the bathtub and noticed that it was very sturdy, like it was made of porcelain. Arya couldn't believe Rain created it. Rain assured that it was all done with basic magic. Next, he decided to pour water into the tank, demonstrating the water creation magic that the girls had learned. Rain creates a large amount of water and lets it flow into the tank. The girls were stunned to see that this could also be done with magic. Rain touched the water and used warming magic. The girls quickly tested the water and were surprised that it was warm. They wonder if magic has limits. Meanwhile, Rain decides to continue working outside, leaving the girls to enjoy the bath. When he left, the girls eagerly undressed and entered the pool. They couldn't believe that they now had their own hot tub. Suddenly, Lin recognized the lion statue she requested, although it looked more like a flower than a lion. However, Sui thinks the design is very unique. Meanwhile, Rain stood outside, listening to the girls' conversation. Feel happy because they appreciate his work. Rain then decided to add soundproofing and make the walls thicker. At this time, the girls' conversation turned to an unexpected topic. They started talking about each other's breasts. Rain heard it and felt very embarrassed. Kiri claims that having large breasts is just a burden, causing her to often have shoulder pain. She said if she could, she would give Arya her breasts. Arya was surprised to hear this, thinking that big breasts would only get in the way. Kiri didn't like Arya's comment, so she started poking the girls' chest to give them some relief. Arya blushed and asked Kiri to stop. Kiri confidently said that Rain would definitely like her breasts, and Arya, blushing even more, protested that there was no reason for her to show her breasts to Rain. At this time, Rain stood outside and heard everything. He collapsed in embarrassment, holding his head. And ask yourself, why is it always me? He tried to convince himself that he didn't hear anything and didn't care at all. To distract himself, Rain focused on drawing pictures and forced himself not to think about what he had just heard. But no matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't do it. The girls continued talking about someone gaining weight and their breasts jiggling. Meanwhile, Rain tried not to listen and focused on building the wall. Finally, the girls finished showering and started getting dressed. Kiri confidently said that Rain is not the type to peek. She told them to rest assured because Rain is a good person they can trust. Arya hoped Kiri was right. As Miria brushed her hair, she added that she also didn't think Rain was a bad person. Arya, annoyed, reminds her that Rain is just someone who works for them, but the girls tell her not to be upset. A while later, the girls stepped outside, enjoying the cool air after bathing. Meanwhile, Rain was still muttering to himself, convincing himself he didn't hear anything as he plastered the wall. Arya passed by and heard him mumbling, asking what he was saying. But Rain didn't answer. The girls just wanted to inform him that he could now take a shower. Night came and the forest became chaotic. The monsters wake up and go hunting, but something is wrong. Suddenly, a monster's head was severed and fell into the bushes. The remaining wolves howled at the moon. The next morning, Arya once again thanked Rain for the new bath and suggested that he should work hard today for the good of the village. However, Rain was not very excited about this suggestion because he felt tired. Kiri suddenly remembered and asked Arya when she would officially register Rain as a citizen of the village. Rain didn't understand why there was a need to register and asked the girls about it. Miria reminds everyone that only men can register new members to the village, but Arya has done it before. When it came to the village being near the monster forest, everyone refused to register. Rain understood the reason because the monster forest was truly dangerous. 100 soldiers were not enough to deal with it. No one wants to take risks. The girls started urging Rain to register their names, saying that now they only had to rely on him. Arya says Rain just needs to go to the village council to register, and they will take care of the rest. Rain agrees but plans to go later, because he wanted to find someone to work for the girls. He admits that he only came here by chance, and when the monster forest is quiet again, he will leave. Lynn feels sad because without Rain, she would have no one to teach her magic, but Rain reassured her, promising to teach her everything she needed to know to protect the village, even though he couldn't stay forever. Kiri was also saddened by his decision and asked Rain why he wanted to leave. Rain didn't know how to explain to the girls. Arya, however, seemed to accept, saying that Rain had done a lot for their village, and it wouldn't be fair to force him to stay. But Kiri still asked Rain if there was anything he didn't like about their village. Miria supported Arya's decision, and Kiri eventually gave in, deciding to follow everyone's wishes and let Rain go. Arya warns Rain that it will take about a week to get to the village council, so he should leave soon. After finishing preparing, Rain was ready to leave. Arya decided to go with him, wearing a warm coat. She looked at Rain and asked if he was okay with his clothes, because it would be cold on the road. But Rain reassured her, explaining that he was using a type of magic called wind protection. Arya was surprised by this, as she had never heard of this magic. Rain decided to prove it to her. He raised his hand towards Arya and read a few appropriate captions. A moment later, Arya realized that she no longer felt cold. She realized this magic not only protected her, but also protected Rain from the cold wind. On the way, Arya said that the area near the monster forest had a warm climate, but they couldn't forget that they were in the north, where it was usually very cold. She shared that every time she went to the city hall, she felt like she was freezing. But now, thanks to Rain and his magic, she is no longer afraid of the cold. Rain just smiled, happy to be able to help Arya. At that moment, Arya admitted that Rain's magic seemed endless to her. She thinks that no matter where Rain goes, he can become a savior. But Rain bowed his head and confessed that it wasn't always like that. He told Arya about how people often made fun of his magic, and how he never received thanks. Rain also revealed that he came here because he was kicked out of his house, and now he has nowhere to go. After hearing that, Arya was surprised. She suddenly realized that Rain was similar to her in one way. In this country, a person's status depends on magical abilities, and without magic, that person is not even considered human. As a child, Arya was called to her father's office. He had heard that Arya couldn't learn magic despite trying with the most famous royal magicians. He decided that someone as incapable as Arya was not worthy of bearing the name Framia. Her father declared that Arya had lost the right to bear the family name, and kicked her out of the house without caring where she would go, or how she would live. After hearing Arya's story, Rain's eyes were filled with regret, but Arya reassures him that this village has become his home, and all the girls here are his family. Rain begins to understand Arya, and he even feels a little jealous of her. She added that Rain could stay in the village forever. However, as soon as she said that, Rain interrupted and asked her to be quiet. He discovered the monster ahead and immediately warned Arya. He discovered that Arya didn't understand why monsters appeared since they rarely left the monster forest without a reason. At this time, Rain noticed that the monsters seemed to be afraid of something ahead, and immediately warned Arya. In the blink of an eye, the wolves began howling, the sound so loud that Arya had to cover her ears. Then they began to move, growling and advancing menacingly. Confused, Arya asked Rain what was going on, but Rain just told her to quickly return to the village. He warned that trouble could be coming. Arya didn't understand why Rain was so nervous. Rain explains that when the forest is damaged, it accumulates magical energy to heal itself, and the monsters can absorb that energy. However, this time, something else has absorbed the remaining mana and is living in the forest, scaring even the monsters. This means that an extremely powerful monster has appeared near the village. Arya realizes what Rain is implying. A powerful monster is nearby, and she decides they must turn back immediately. But they were already halfway there. Rain saw the panic in Arya's eyes and told her not to worry. He picked her up and told her to hold him tightly. Arya was not prepared for this and wanted to ask Rain to slow down, but he advised her not to say too much to avoid biting her tongue. Before Arya could ask if Rain was using body-strengthening magic, they rushed towards the village at breakneck speed. Meanwhile, Kiri, unsuspecting, decides to go get water, but she realizes she will have to travel a long way to get it. She thought that when Rain came back, it would be a great idea if he built a well near the village. At that moment, strange noises came from the forest. When looking forward, Kiri suddenly dropped the bucket of water. In front of her was a wolf-like monster, scarier than anything she had ever seen. In front of her was a wolf like half a day ago, Lynn walked into the house, holding 2 rabbits she had just hunted. She wanted to show off her achievements to everyone, scarier than anything she had ever seen. Miria is delighted to see the big rabbits, while Kiri, less impressed, asked Lynn if she's sure it's not a monster rabbit. But Lynn didn't think that they looked like monsters, and in fact they didn't turn to stone after death, as monsters usually do. Miria even thought about how great it would be if they could eat monsters. Kiri and Lynn were not interested in that idea. Kiri reminded Lynn to be more careful when going into the forest. Even though Rain has built a protective moat around the village, the monster forest is still full of danger. Miria is worried about Arya and Rain, knowing they have gone to the city hall. But Lynn comforted and confidently said that she could protect everyone. Lynn believes they can defeat any monster because of Rain's training. When Kiri decided to go get water, a period of time passes. Miria, Sui, and Lynn were in the house, preparing the rabbits that Lynn brought home. Suddenly, Kiri rushed into the house, panicking, surprising everyone. She was breathing heavily and looked tired. The girls immediately ran over, repeatedly asking what happened, but Kiri signaled them to be quiet. When everything calmed down, Kiri explained that a giant black wolf had appeared from the monster forest. Kiri claims that she has never seen this creature before, and that it jumped over the moat that Rain built. However, Miria remembered Rain's words, saying that monsters could not cross the moat. With her usual optimism, Lynn tried to comfort Kiri, offering to worry after lunch. But at that moment, a loud noise rang out in the house, followed by a shaking sound on the roof. The girls were scared, not daring to move. A moment later, a howl filled the air, and things on the shelves began to fall. Even though she was scared, Lynn approached the window, hoping to see the wolf, whose howl she had never heard before, and at that moment the wolf appeared, lurking right under the window, looking at Lynn with curious eyes. The girls stiffened with fear, unable to move. Before he could blink, the wolf rushed into the window, shattered the glass. Lynn immediately recognized this type of monster, while Kiri shouted, saying that this was the wolf she had mentioned, and that it had indeed crossed the moat. The girls were confused, not knowing what to do because Rain was not in the village. Kiri suggested calling Rain for help, but Miria objected, saying that it was impossible because Rain and Arya were too far away. Miria suggests they hide in a room and barricade the door. Once the girls were safely in the room, the wolf continued to wreak havoc, destroying everything around.
Lynn began to worry, not knowing when the wolf would leave. However, Sui did not think it would retreat. She insisted that the wolf had taunted them when first seen, and it did smirk during its first attack. Lynn begins to wonder if they can defeat the wolf the way her brother, Rain, did. But Kiri advises her to stop thinking about that and focus on surviving until Rain returns. At that moment, Miria remembered something important. She said that Rain had left them special items for a situation like this. Everyone was happy, praising Rain for his thoughtfulness. Lynn eagerly asked where the items were, and Miria replied that they were in Rain's room. In a panic, Lynn enthusiastically suggested that they quickly get those items to destroy the monster. Without hesitation, the girls ran into Rain's room and began searching for the items Miria mentioned. Kiri anxiously urged them to find the item as quickly as possible, asking Miria, who was standing at the door, to join the search as well. But Miria has another plan. She walked out of the room and locked the door from the outside. The girls inside quickly realized what had happened and immediately begged her to open the door. However, Miria calmly told them to stay in their room and not go out until everything was quiet. Kiri realized that Miria was planning to act as bait for the wolf. She started banging on the door, begging Miria not to do something stupid. But Miria only reminded Kiri to take care of the other girls. Then without hesitation, she ran towards the door, screaming and telling her friends not to stop her. Meanwhile, Lynn argues that they need to find a way to get Kiri back. As Miria walked through the ruins of her house, she felt a cold aura of fear. She had never heard of monsters that were so unusual compared to common animals. When they attacked the village, nothing but the bones of their victims were left behind. Miria didn't know if this was true, but she believed that Rain could handle the situation. Miria only had one choice left. She hoped the monster would only be satisfied with herself, though with little faith, she believed that if her hunch was correct, the others would be saved. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the doorknob, but she knew she had to stay calm. Finally, she opened the door and decided to run far away without looking back, because the house could be destroyed further. But immediately, the scary wolf appeared in front of her. Its terrifying face and roar frightened Miria. She couldn't believe that she couldn't buy a little more time. Closing her eyes, she thought about her family and the people she loved, Sui, Lin, Arya, and Kiri. In the end, Miria decided to sacrifice herself to protect the smiles of those she cherished. Closing her eyes, she prepared to face the worst. But suddenly, rocks and dirt flew towards the monster. Miria opened her eyes, turned around. See, girls? They decided to attack the monster with earth magic. Miria did not understand what her friends were doing because she told them to hide, but they asked her to be quiet and assured her they would not let her die alone. At that moment, the monster's eyes turned towards Miria again. Sui and Lin's powers were exhausted, but the monster did not appear to be affected. It opened its mouth, preparing to swallow Miria whole. But suddenly a giant mound of earth rose from the ground, lifting the monster and preventing it from swallowing Miria. Miria looked at the monster, confused by what had just happened. Sui, Lin, and Kiri also stood stunned, surprised. At that moment, the monster fell back to the ground, and a cloak appeared behind Miria. It's Rain with Arya. Lin and Sui were happy to see them back. Arya rushed over to Miria, who was still sitting on the ground, asking what happened. Arya explains that they heard a scary howl on the road and decided to turn back. Rain, although happy that Miria was not injured, showed no emotion. Instead, he simply ordered the girls to stand still while he advanced towards the monster. At this time, the monster stood firmly, all 4 feet on the ground facing Rain. Normally, Rain's magic would destroy the monster instantly. But this time, he realized the monster was stronger than any enemy he had ever faced. Rain is certain that this monster shouldn't be here and seems to be acting on blind instinct. Looking at its claws, Rain suspected the monster was trying to run away. But he knew that wasn't an option. Determined not to let such a dangerous creature escape, the tough Rain is ready to end it. The monster, sensing its chances of survival were slipping away, had only one choice left. As Rain prepared, he unleashed a powerful spell to destroy the monster. When the monster bit his shoulder, it quickly realized it couldn't harm him. At that moment, Rain simply waved his hand, and the monster was thrown far into the mountains. The girls stared in amazement, stunned by Rain's boundless power. Finally, the monster crashed into the mountain, causing a huge explosion. After a while, they realized that the creature had created a hole through the entire mountain. Only ruins remain. Their house is now just a pile of ruins. Kiri, angry, began to yell at Miria, asking why she sacrificed herself for everyone. Miria bowed her head and silently apologized. Lin tried to comfort Kiri, telling her to calm down, but Kiri also yelled at Lin, insisting that she would handle this herself.